How often do you drink water? Well, approximately, according to a study done many years ago, approximately 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated, so they're not drinking that much water as it is. But let's say you don't drink water. What do you use water for? Washing your dishes, washing yourself, which I hope you do. Watering your grass if you're a trust fund baby lunatic. But what else do you use water for? Think about it. Because whatever you're using water for, you're not going to be using it for long. Arizona water chief predicts feds will step in on Colorado River conflict. Now, you may not have heard about this, but there's a burgeoning, if you will, water war going on in the United States of America, not in the plains of uncivilized sub-Saharan Africa, as people love to consider this kind of stuff. But there is a water war happening here and now in the United States of America. Now, again, have we gotten to the point where there are people shooting each other over water? No. But there are legal battles, there are lawsuits, and there's bad blood boiling in a lot of these southwestern states in the United States. So, let's read some information here. The federal government will likely end up putting its foot down in a state-to-state squabble over cuts in Colorado River consumption, Arizona's water chief told The Hill. We will continue to try to get an agreement, said Tom Bouchard, director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources. The path we're on seems like the federal government's going to step in. Negotiations among the 7 states that rely on this key western waterway have been taking place for months, with the goal of significantly reducing usage of an over-allocated resource. The states had agreed to a rough deadline of January 31, aware that the Federal Bureau of Reclamation had threatened to impose cuts itself if an agreement failed to materialize. What did materialize were 2 opposing proposals, a joint deal from 6 out of the 7 states last Monday, and a competing offer from the outlier, California, on Tuesday. The details of the plans are so incompatible that the government will likely inconvene, either with a unilateral solution or a combination of imposed and voluntary measures, according to who has served as Arizona's chief negotiator in the matter. Differences between the 6-state proposal and California's proposal just further cements in my mind that's the path we're on, said. Some 40 million people across 7 U.S. states and Mexico rely on the Colorado River for drinking water, agriculture, and hydroelectric power. But this lifeblood of the West is governed by a century-old agreement that allotted river users with more water than was actually available. Say what? So, you got $100, and you start passing out $150 worth of loans, you're going to run into a problem pretty quick. The Colorado River Compact of 1922, there's a lot of this bullshit going on. Like, you have that Railway Labor Act or whatever from 1920 or whatever the fuck, and now we got this shit from 1922. We got a lot of, like, stupid laws that are fucking us up, like, on the 100 years later time span. So what's going on with that? Divided the U.S. states into 2 sections that would each receive 7.5 million acre-feet of water per year. Upper basin states are Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, while the lower basin comprises Arizona, California, and Nevada. 2 decades after the domestic compact, a cross-border agreement, the Mexican Water Treaty of 1944 earmarked an additional 1.5 million acre-feet each year to Mexico, where the river historically met its endpoint in the Sea of Cortez. That's not a good name for a sea, you know? Like, it would be like, you know, like, okay, we'll name our ocean, we'll name our water that we live by the guy that came over and killed us all. I don't know, man. A little weird. But, maybe, it would be weirder if they had a holiday for him. You know? Wouldn't that be a little weird if they had a holiday for some guy that came over to the country and just started genociding a bunch of people randomly for no reason? And then they gave that guy, I mean, they already gave him the name of the sea. I'm just, just asking questions. A single acre-foot of water today can meet the annual needs of between 1 and 3 U.S. West households, depending on the precise location. One major focus of the six-state plan negotiated by and his colleagues involved the sharing the burden for water losses that occur during evaporation and transit. The plan calls for a combined reduction of 250,000 acre-feet, 93,000 acre-feet for Arizona, 10,000 for Nevada, and 147,000 for California, when the water level of the Lake Mead Reservoir reaches an elevation of 1030 feet or below. Now, again, Lake Mead's been in the news a lot over the course of last year with, apparently it was some like mafia burial ground and also just general crimes. A lot of people were finding a bunch of dead bodies in Lake Mead. But how is that possible? How did that happen? That was a big story last year that people were sharing around. But again, it's because climate change, which, by the way, controversial. I know a lot of people get triggered when they hear the term climate change. But it's actually kind of fucking around with our water sources. Our lakes are getting smaller and so on and so forth. Our dams are drying up. So in Lake Mead's instance, right, the lake is getting shallower and shallower, and dead bodies are starting to float to the surface. Whoops, just throwing that one out there. A little fun fact. Additional collective cutbacks of 200,000 acre-feet would apply to these states if Lake Mead's elevation plunged to 1020 feet and below. Today, Lake Mead sits at an elevation of 1046 feet, according to the Bureau of Reclamation. California's competing proposal, on the other hand, adheres to the basin's traditional water priority system determined in the 1922 Compact. That system granted the largest Colorado River allocation to California, despite its location at the end of the waterway. The proposal builds on previous agency commitments, though, which the Golden State would conserve an additional 400,000 acre-feet of water each year through 2026. Also included in the plan are voluntary cuts of 560,000 acre-feet from Arizona and 40,000 acre-feet from Nevada. So if you can read the rest of this, but essentially these plans are not working out. These states, they're not enjoying each other's company, to say the least, and the United States government is going to have to step in. Now, again, we haven't really seen anything like this in the United States. At least in a long time. And by we, I mean the people alive today. In the United States history, right, yeah, we've had, wars over stuff like that, again, this law that we're referencing was written in the 1920s, so how did that come about? Probably there was some issue going on, so they decided to write a law. But again, in our lifetime, we haven't really seen this kind of thing, fighting for water. And it's going to get worse. So there's a drought in California. I've heard some people suggest that the drought in California, whatever you would use, whatever metric you would use to qualify it as a drought, it might be a forever drought, in the sense where, droughts are typically seasonal or like a couple years, in a row. But we might hit a point where it's like, all right, California, permanent drought. We're here forever. We always have a drought. And we need to reassess what our words mean and how to get out of it. So that's what it's looking like. That's what it's looking like is going on in that region. And again, the water sources are drying up. We also know that the water sources in the United States are being poisoned by companies that drop, metals, forever chemicals, PFAS, that kind of stuff in waterways and we also, our water treatment in this country is trash. It's trash. I mean, does anyone remember Barack Obama pretending to drink the water in Flint, Michigan? Right? Our water treatment systems in this country are garbage. Garbage. We have some of the worst water quality out of the so-called developed world. Our water quality is on par with so-called third world countries in a lot of areas. Unless you live in a rich zip code. If you live in a very wealthy zip code, your water's going to be pretty good. But if you live where the 99% live, your water quality is going to be trash. Now, again, some states have better water quality than others. Some some counties, some cities are better than, of course, right? There's variability. But pretty much by every metric, almost everyone in the United States is drinking unsafe levels of contaminants in their water. And again, there's two kinds of things that the EPA has a guidance for water contaminants, right? And then there's also science that says, yeah, you don't want any more of this. Now, the EPA is always going to do worse than the science, right? The EPA is always going to be more lenient than what the science would suggest, right? So we're at a point where people aren't even meeting the EPA guidelines. The EPA is not doing anything about it. And the EPA's guidelines already were ridiculously high already. So again, I highly recommend you get a water filter, and if you have the money for it, and I know money is in short supply, but especially when it comes to my audience, but I would consider finding some way that you can store water I don't know, get a water filter at the very least. Water storage is something to consider long term. We're talking 5-10 years, medium term, I guess. Because it's going to get worse. And you want to drink more water for health reasons. And you got to really start taking this shit seriously, because if you don't have a plan, 15 years, 20 years down the road, who knows where we're going to be. But anyway, so several United States states are fighting over water. Now, again, this is not a physical fight. It's not like the National Guard of California is going to go up against the National Guard of Arizona or anything like that. Maybe in 30 years, maybe in 10 years, who knows? But it's, again, we're heading down that path. So